Hello there, YouTube. Devin here again, and today I have a first of the kind of older uniforms that I own, and this is actually kind of a economy and rear line uniform of one of my favorite countries to collect from, and I love it because it is a mishmash of retrofitted interwar stuff, World War II stuff, and World War I stuff, all smashed in together to just try to equip a rapidly inflating army just in case they would have to be invaded by Germany. Now, this country happens to be Switzerland, if you can't tell by how the little crosses on the buttons. And I have a couple of these uniforms, and so we're going to go over a couple different parts of this uniform. The hat is obviously the M36 hat, which really won't be super featured well in this video. I also haven't decided what wool uniform I'm going to compare all of my older wool uniforms to yet, so this one will be just kind of a standalone video showing you some specific examples and stuff that I have. Some of the nicer ones anyways. I've got quite a few of these uniforms, and I was just going to use them for fabric and stuff like that, to kind of better retrofit them, because there is a ton of examples of these uniforms, and everything that I'm wearing right now actually ranges in date from 1915 until 1950. But obviously this hat was the hat that was made in 1950, and I believe that this one was like 51 or 52. But anyways, so that's beside the point. I got a couple different tunics to show you, and the interesting thing about the tunics is that they were once greatcoats, cut down into tunics. You probably can't see, but they're actually quite short. These tunics are now, and they were meant to be, because the history behind this is obviously Switzerland was an ocean of, a drop of neutrality in an ocean of national socialism. Sorry, it's still pretty early here yet. Through World War II, and there was a point where it got to where the German high command and Hitler and everyone themselves really wanted to complete the set, get all of, mainland Europe under their wing. The only one that didn't do that, basically, was obviously Sweden and Switzerland. Now, the big problem with Sweden is Sweden had worked out kind of a lot of playing both sides of the war, and had a lot of natural resources they were basically willing to just give Germany. Sweden, was in that weird kind of spot where they were able to do that. Switzerland, on the other hand, has had a history since the Napoleonic Wars of a aggressive neutrality type thing. And they did stuff with both the Allies and both the Axis powers, but it was mostly just kind of frig off. That was kind of their approach to everything. It got to the point where there was plans called Operation Tannenbaum, which translates to Christmas tree, to invade Switzerland. But it came down to, it was one of the first main points where it was almost a unanimous thing. There was quite a lot of pushback against German, Supreme High Command and stuff like that, about how we could. That's the thing. Everyone likes to think that, a lot of the big Swiss fanboys and everything like to think that Switzerland could have held off all of Europe attacking them at once, all of the allied nations of the Nazis and the Germans and stuff like that, all at once, because they would have been probably attacked by the Italians from the south, the Germans from the north, and stuff like that. The French and stuff from the west. It would have been pretty rough for Switzerland, and Switzerland couldn't win that, and they knew they couldn't win that invasion. So they went to this whole point where they were just gonna go. We're like, well, we know we can't win, so we're just going to make it not worth it to take. Because they knew the Germans, if they wanted it bad enough, could take it. They could take Switzerland. Just boom, done. That's to all the people that think Switzerland could have held them off. Yeah, the K-31's great. Yes, Swiss soldiers are very good. Home field advantage, all that jazz. They knew they couldn't win. The Swiss even have a document. They know they could not win. So what they did is basically through the late 30s, and early 40s, has just swelled their ranks to huge numbers from their normal, couple 100,000 defense force. Obviously, every male above the age of 18 is a trained soldier meant to keep his rifle. There's a wide range of rifles still in use, everything from the K31, the K11, the G11, the 9611s, 96s, all the way back to 1889s are still in use with various lines of the Swiss military at this point throughout the war. And uniforms are as well. But a lot of the problem is when you leave your service, your uniform is maintained for a little while, and then it is oftentimes, destroyed, worn out, thrown away, attacked by moths, all that other good stuff. So they had a problem. They had enough guns. And they were able to make enough guns, and their guns were very good quality. Swiss really don't make anything bad, but the problem came with the uniforms. Here is where we get to the part where we start even seeing the Swiss start to cut corners when it comes to the economy of World War II. And luckily they were able to make their country enough of a porcupine to where, the big German lion, their affinity for large cats and stuff like that, tiger, lion, whatever you want to imagine Germany as a large cat. The Swiss approach was to just be a porcupine. A porcupine can't keep a lion from killing it, but the lion's really going to think twice. They just cover their country in bunkers, mined every road, every mountain pass, ready to create avalanches and stuff like that, interlocking fields of fire all over the country, minefields all over the place. The Swiss were like, we know we can't win, but we're going to make sure there's nothing worth taking, and you're going to fight for every inch. So, but their uniforms, which is what this video is about after that basic history of Switzerland, to kind of explain how they got to this uniform, swelled their ranks in their army to great rates, the largest rates they have ever to date, actually. And so they had to start pulling old uniforms out of stock and recycling material and old stuff from older patterns of uniforms and stuff like that. So what they did is they started taking kind of older, more worn down greatcoats from World War I and the interwar, and they cut the skirts off of them and just hemmed them over. Same thing with the sleeves. They would actually, as you could see here, replace the cuffs by just cutting them off and sewing new fabric on to get them to the length of the soldier they were giving them to and stuff like that. Many soldiers would have their uniforms tailored. You could find some of these economified greatcoats with, the cuff markings and stuff like that, different ranks and stuff on them. These are all blank right now. But, with their branch and stuff, they're color-coded to their branch. You could see different cuffs, depends on when it was made, and whether the soldier got it tailored or not. It's a pretty common thing to see a bunch of different stuff done to them. A lot of times these are considered a mountain trooper uniform, but basically every Swiss soldier is a mountain trooper because Switzerland. So I don't know why people say that, but you can find regular infantry, line infantry units, rear line infantry units, front line infantry units, medics, pilots, everything with this type of economified uniform. But usually it's not the very front line tip of the spear. They would get the new uniforms. A lot of these would be like reservists and stuff like that would get these kind of older, more economified uniforms, and you can find them in tons of different configurations. So I actually have two versions, and this is kind of a later one that I'm wearing, and then I have an earlier one, and you can see that these things survived actually till a while after World War II, because they ended up getting retrofitted with plastic buttons and stuff like that. So, but we'll go into, kind of explaining the ins and outs of these two uniforms. I have a couple different examples of the tunic to show you. This one much newer. I have one that is much older than this version too, at least the original greatcoat it was made from, and stuff like that to show you kind of some of the differences and variances you can see in the uniform. So, and then I will show you the pants and explain to you the different kinds of pants and trousers they would be using and stuff like that. I don't have any of the underclothing. This is just the main over uniform, so stay tuned for that as we flip around and I begin to show you the two tunics that I have in this example of wartime economy Switzerland. One of the very few times you see economy Switzerland. So, alrighty, so here we go. First things first, we are looking at a greatcoat, an uncut down one. Now, I'm not sure when this one was made, but they didn't really change from basically World War I, other than some kind of economy features, really well into into the 70s and 80s. Quite a long time. You can still see the white metal buttons. That's usually an indicator of kind of a later one. And the fact that it doesn't have the little brass hooks, you see these loops for the belt. So the greatcoat, they are all obviously double-breasted. Let's see if I can find a date on this one as to when it was made. Everything on the Swiss stuff, kind of like the German stuff, is all fairly well marked. That's the size. So must be 1940 this one was made. I'm not seeing any other dates on it. So some of them, the dates are really faded. They are just little red dye stamps. To be fair, some of them hold up though. They're kind of hard to see, and they would remain that way for quite a long time. As you can see, it's half lined with kind of a cotton twill material, a thin cotton twill material, just so it doesn't itch. Nothing really fancy on that though. So the greatcoats would obviously be sized a little bit heavier. And I have seen some pictures of guys wearing the cut down greatcoat tunic with a greatcoat over it for winter use. So basically you're wearing two greatcoats, one's just half length compared to the full length ones. But as you can see, this one is an uncut down one, full hem. So, and here we have my two examples of cut down ones. Now, one of these is a recycled interwar one, much newer, and then I have a much older kind of interwar, very early interwar era one, as you could tell by the brass buttons as compared to the white metal buttons. They are the same pattern though. They are both cut down from the same pattern of greatcoat because once again they never really changed. The date on this one is 41, so it's made in Bern, as you can see by that little stamp there. It's probably kind of hard to see there, so I'll bring it up to you. See the little, it's very faded, 41 Bern, and I wear a size 50, so there's your 50 for the original size there in a tunic, but I like a 52 greatcoat because obviously it has to fit over uniforms. Once again, you can see it is half lined with that kind of gray material. You could see the old cut here where the greatcoat tail would come up, and it has a little button here in case you don't want that. You want it to kind of fit together a little nicer. Plastic button, which is why you could tell this one was used quite a lot later. You would see them used for training purposes for quite a long time, even after they were phased out, given to new recruits in training and stuff like that, because the Swiss don't throw anything away, much like Finland does. So they are wearing, the same uniform for quite a long time until they all basically disintegrate, or they're pushed so far into rear line units where they just tell people to keep them. This is an example of one of those. It's actually in pretty good shape. For the later one, you can see there's your pockets that go to your outside, not a very large pocket, stuff like that. It does have the X stamp on it, meaning it was removed from service, stuff like that. Double-breasted greatcoat, obviously. Collar, little hooks, plastic buttons up here under the collar to, retrofit. Here's your little keeper on the collar, and this was part of the tunic, because the tunic would have a stand collar. Obviously, the greatcoat didn't for its longest time, because you would not have ranks on your greatcoat up here on the collar, but on the the Swiss stuff, you would have your denomination of your unit and stuff like that. Your some identification on your stand and fall collar. On the Swiss tunics, the actual tunics. So in order to make it so that way you could have some neck insulation, they just retrofitted these with this little just kind of oval of wool you would swing around and button across the collar, because the greatcoats didn't have a stand collar like that. So it's one of the retrofits to help it function as a tunic. So this one obviously is later. You can see the economified pockets. It's just a flap. There is no button or secure to this pocket. And then for your belt, for your service belt, you would just see a wool loop put on there, so held in place by a button. So and that's one of the later examples, 41. So now we're going to look at the much older examples, some of the differences between it. Obviously, the cuffs are going to be the same. As you can see, this wool is much darker. It's much more used. It's very well worn. Same thing, though. They would just add wool to the cuffs and stuff like that to fit it to the soldier is being given to. The much older brass buttons. Same exact model of jacket, though. Hook, hanging drawstring. Same gray kind of liner. Okay, except now you have a kind of bandage pouch here, pocket pouch. Watch pouch, something like that would be here. You can see it does have these big kind of liners that come down a little further towards the rear of the the greatcoat, but you can see it was very crudely cut and just stitched. The stitching isn't even really even. Some places it's only a 1/4 inch away, a few millimeters from the stitching, and other times it's almost 1/2 inch. So you could tell it's a very crudely cut down example of a greatcoat because they just needed to make more tunics. As you can see, this one much more well used too. Lots of yellowing around it, but still in really, really good shape, especially once you see how old this tunic actually is. Did this one get the collar modification as well? Yes, it did, but you can see it's done with kind of older style brass buttons. You can see the very, very white thread they would have used, whereas if you would have seen later, they would have went to a blue kind of gray thread. Like on this jacket, you see under the collar the blue gray thread. It's not white thread anymore, which is something they did away with kind of in the 40s. So here we have the jacket, and this one was manufactured originally as a greatcoat in 1923. This is a size 48. As you can see, it's been restamped over a bunch of times. It was originally a size 50. You can see it there. The original 50 with the 1923 stamp, probably stamped around the same date. But it was, for some reason, the sizes either changed or it shrunk up a little bit when they modified it and everything, and it was decided that this would be better as a size 48. So you could see the very prominent red stamp over it. And there's its acceptance mark and stuff like that, which is really, really cool. I love that the Swiss did stuff like that. This one does not have the former little tail splice. It was probably much shorter down, so they cut that off. And the pockets here have a button to secure them. They are also much larger and entirely external, these pockets are, whereas the newer parts of the, on the newer jacket, they are internal pockets, just a little cotton flap, and then it's just a cut in the uniform, because I'm sure that was cheaper to do than using the wool to make a big, large external pocket secured by a button. But once again, you see the pocket buttons have been replaced by plastic ones, indicating it stayed in service for quite a while. So at some point those were probably worn out and the buttonholes got too worn out and they needed to put larger buttons on to make sure the pocket would stay closed. The next thing is, you can see, if we flip these over to the back, you can see all the brass buttons to adjust the girth of the jacket. And then you see the kind of older style, the brass hooks for hanging the belt rather than the loops. So, which is pretty neat, I think. So, and then I'll flip over the new one here so you can take a look at that. Same thing, white metal buttons though. You don't see, and you see much more panels of wool on this one, on the newer one. Much more economy than the older style. You see these big reinforcements on the older one, and stuff like that. No seams, the back is all one piece of wool, whereas if you look at, basically the whole jacket is one piece of wool with the sleeves attached on the older one, but you see this one is much more panels of wool, obviously much nicer. It's actually a coarser. This is a much coarser weave of wool than the older one too, something to do with the economy and stuff like that. But you can see a lot of cool examples and tons of variations of these, and you can actually still buy these. They're still around. And then just to bring it back, we'll take a look at the full jacket. So you can see here, plastic, you know, kind of Bakelite style buttons, the full-on skirt. To, you know, obviously if you're riding a horse or a bike or something, you would want to get rid of these. There's also buttonholes down here around the bottom of the jacket, so you can kind of bring the tails up if you are riding a bike so they don't catch on anything. The Swiss obviously very big onto bicycles and horses and stuff like that for movement of goods and supplies and whatnot. And then of course the same 4-button adjustability here in the back on the greatcoat. So pretty neat, I think. It's a pretty cool economy uniform. So after this, we're now going to take a look at a pair of the pants. Now that we've seen 2 different versions of the tunic, we're going to go take a look at a version of the pants, which I'm still wearing actually. So stay tuned. Alrighty, so here we are with the trousers now that I use as part of my rear line economy uniform for the Swiss in World War II. And as you can see here, this is a pair of breeches. Now, a lot of people tell me the Swiss didn't use breeches in World War II, especially for infantry and stuff like that. And the cavalry was kind of turned into transportation rather than a fighting force during World War II, obviously. But they did. You actually see rear line troops getting issued breeches. Not the new model of breeches that, like, the NCOs and the officers would be wearing. This is the old, last pattern of breeches. This is the World War I era uniform that the Swiss would have been reissuing and, you know, cannibalizing for wool and buttons and other stuff to make uniforms for soldiers during World War II. And as you can see, this one once again must have stayed in service for a long time because the buttons have been replaced with plastic buttons, and they're not even all the same. So the ones up here are different colored, where, you know, they're not all black. Some of them are kind of gray, different sizes and stuff like that. You can see that. Here's one that's kind of been polished a little bit and stuff. But you see way down here by the cuffs, where initially they would have all been probably zinc buttons or, you know, something like that. The kind of dish type buttons, you see kind of tan and brown buttons. As stuff would have been replaced and, you know, worn out, they would have just thrown plastic buttons on them. This uniform probably saw service into the 50s. This pair of pants specifically, anyways, you can see just the plain black stripe down the sides, slash pockets, not very large in size, the slash pockets are. Flipping the pants open here, I suppose, since we don't have anything yet that we are comparing it to, you can see the big reinforcement here on the seat. So this person was probably a cavalry model of pants. Once again, not uncommon to see these issued, though, into World War II. So big reinforced seat, and inside of the leg, double layers of wool. No crotch gusset or anything, but you see lots of heavy stitching there to keep it from falling apart. Obviously tighter around the calves to wear with gaiters or jack boots, or puttees that would be very, very common through the interwar. You see the buttons up the front of the pants. Once again, these plastic style of buttons, brass little loop closure up here. As you can see, there's the little hook for it. These are entirely lined, but they're lined with two separate materials. You see the kind of twill that you would find in the greatcoats and the regular tunics and stuff like that. The pockets are made out of a much more durable kind of herringbone weave cotton, though, which is something they could afford to do. And then obviously you see there was a reinforcement added much later, because it is not this white cotton, it is these darker kind of blue cotton that you would see probably into the 50s, and judging by the fact that there's absolutely no discoloration on these, it was put on very near the end of its service life, and everything like that. So the tag in this one, once again, you can see here, here's the maker and the acceptance mark. There's the size of it, the X that it was removed from service, some writing on it. Now there was a date on here. Ah, yes, here it is. Here's the manufacture date. This was made in 1915, this original pair of breeches. So this is the World War I pattern of breeches. Once again, you know, the X, the acceptance stamp. So they're removed from service, the maker and acceptance stamp, the size, everything like that, all in here, just some writing on there, don't know where that came from. Another mark that's so faded you can't tell, but you can see the original red dye acceptance stamp there, 1915. This pair of pants was originally made. So just a really, really cool piece that stayed in service for quite a long time, and I'm just going to do the top button up here. You can see the kind of field-made reinforcements to keep it from wearing out. They're just looped through stitching up there. Obviously, this would be a high wear point right by the top front button. Here in the back, you would see adjustability, obviously, because this pant has no belt loops. It would be worn with braces and or suspenders, and you would have this kind of old rusty buckle here that you could see. It's a Prima buckle, and it's got some rust on it and everything from where it was sitting in storage for probably so long before it got to me. But you would use this strap and these two by the way, very sharp if you don't have this buckle done. You accidentally sit on it. Those are very, very sharp little points, as you could tell there. To adjust the waist of your pants would be with this strap, and you would just pierce it rather than having buttons for adjustability or anything like that, which gives you a lot of stuff. So rather than needing a buttonhole or something like that, you could adjust this to perfectly fit you for whatever you're wearing underneath it or not wearing underneath it or whatever you want. So very, very neat. It's obviously higher in the back than it is in the front, as with the style of the time. Very high back pants, fully reinforced seat, everything like that. It's a very, very neat pair of trousers, and you could see pictures of these being used into World War II for a long time. And the fact that this one has seen so many different buttons and button styles and different colors of buttons and repairs and stamps I'm guessing they were in service for a very, very long time and probably reissued and retrofitted and repaired a lot. So hopefully you learned something about some kind of one of the few examples of economy Swiss uniforms and everything like that, because I have a few examples here going all the way back to World War I, with this example being made in 1915. So thank you all for stopping by. Hopefully you learned something cool and stuff like that, especially if you like Swiss stuff as much as me. It's kind of a long rambling video because you have to cover some history as to why these were made, because a lot of people like to think that Switzerland didn't really skimp on quality. Well, they did. And these are some examples of that. The fact that they couldn't make fast enough, so they used old stuff, which I think is really, really cool. So hopefully you like this video, you subscribe, you like this sort of thing, all that other good stuff. Thank you all for watching. If you think I'm worth a donation, the goal is to get to $100 a month on Patreon by the end of the year. We're getting pretty close to the end of the year. We're still about $30 away. High hopes and stuff like that. We're also really, really close to 4,000 subscribers. We're only about 100 away on that. So that would also be really, really cool to get to 4,000. So the goal would be, you know, January was when I started my channel a couple of years back. So if we could get 1,000 a year, we're doing it. We're on par to hit it, but hopefully we can a little early. That'd be great. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all here in the next video.